Hello and thank you for joining us today. Today again we have with us an art from expert and an officer of the Vedic Dhamma. So what exactly is Jyoti in the context of day two and how is it done? Thank you for joining us today. So in Gurudev's day two session, the word Jyoti is not merely a flame, it's a moment of inner awareness. When Gurudev said, how is the Jyoti done? It's done this way. There is no effort in doing the Jyoti. It was pointing towards a subtle process where awareness circulates like light within the mind in our inner space. A glow arises naturally when the mind drops struggle. Many people think Jyoti means visualizing a lamp or staring at a candle, but Gurudev's approach is different. It is the lightness that emerges when effort dissolves, the moment one relaxes into the breath. The body drops resistance and this subtle flow begins by itself. In Vedic tradition, Jyoti is described as Antar Jyoti, the inner flame. Ritualistically, Jyoti Deepam is offered outside, but its purpose is the awakening of the flame inside. Gurudev's teaching reflects the Upanishadic ideal. The real flame is awareness, the Vedic texts say, Na tatra surya bhati. The sun does not shine there, the self shines by itself. So, Jyoti practice is not something you do, but something that happens when the mind becomes steady and sattvic. Gurudev said to feel the ananda. How does this ananda signify here? Jagadav, Ananda is not simply happiness, it's the stability of joy without an external cause. After Jyoti awakens, the first noticeable experience is a soft blissfulness arising in the chest or head. Gurudev emphasized Ananda because most people try to achieve a meditative state, whereas meditation actually arises when you stop trying to achieve anything. Anand comes when the nervous system becomes coherent. This is why Gurudev repeatedly said there is no effort. Ananda is the natural byproduct of dropping effort. In Vedic Dharma, Ananda is the third aspect of the Atman, the Sat, the truth, the Chit, the pure consciousness, and Ananda of the bliss. Day two of Gurudev's teaching subtly leads practitioners from Chitta, the awareness arising Jyoti practice, into Ananda. The Vedic scriptures say the Raso Vaisaha, the divine is a pure bliss. Ananda emerges not because we become something new, but because the layers hiding our inner bliss dissolve. Gurudev's instructions mirrors the Taititri Upanishads progression from body, energy, mind, knowledge, and bliss. Now, what does Gurudev mean when he says, didn't it happen today that there is something lacking in him? This line refers to the moment when a seeker realizes that they are searching for something without knowing what exactly they are searching for. Gurudev points to the universal human feeling of incompleteness during meditation as the mind becomes still. This feeling becomes visible, but instead of treating it as a defect, Gurudev explains that the feeling itself is a doorway. When one notices incompleteness, it means a consciousness is ready for evolution. The sense of lack is not a failure, it is a sign that the inner journey has begun. In Vedic psychology, this is called apurnata, the awareness of incompleteness. Scriptures say the human psychology begins the moment one feels something is missing. The Mundaka Upanishad, Gurudev beautifully transforms this into spiritual insight. What you are lacking is only the recognition of your own completeness. In the ritualistic context, even offerings to deities begin with the declaration, I am incomplete, complete me through your grace. Gurudev directly connects this ancient idea to the modern mind. Now, Gurudev then says, there is the completeness. And what is the completeness? That the completeness is not perfection or personality or removal of flaws. It's the recognition that your inner being is already whole. Gurudev is pointing to the shift from mental identity to pure presence. When you sit in meditation and become aware of the breath, the awareness expands beyond likes, dislikes, judgment, and memory. In that expanded state, you feel whole. This is completeness. Nothing external changes, but the sense of self becomes full. The Vedic Dharma defines the completeness through the famous mantra of Isha Upanishad, Purnamada Purnamidam. The essence is simple. The whole produces only in whole. The soul is not a fragment, but a full expression of consciousness. Gurudev's day to teaching mirrors this exactly. The moment the seeker recognizes the inner Jyoti and Ananda, the intellect realizes that the Atman was never incomplete. The completeness Gurudev refers to is the recognition of one's inherent Brahmic nature. Now, what is the action of taking this mentally that Gurudev elaborates on? Gurudev refers to the subtle shift when you mentally allow yourself to embrace the experience of completeness. Many young people meditate mechanically, they breathe, they sit, but they don't mentally receive the experience. Gurudev emphasizes that a mental acceptance or inner taking in is necessary. It means the mind stops rejecting the experience and stops doubting it. When the mind participates instead of resisting, meditation deepens instantly. In the Vedic ritual tradition, every offering or ahuti must be received mentally before being offered physically. This is called the Manasa Samarpana, the mental acceptance. Gurudev applies the same principle internally. Accept the state, embrace the experience. Otherwise, the mind slips back into habitual patterns. When he says action of taking mentally, he means allowing the inner transformation to register in consciousness. This matches the Yoga Sutra principle. Pratyaksha Anumana Agama Pramanani. True knowing arises when the mind accepts the inner experience as valid. Now, Gurudev mentioned people can be affected by this. What is the meaning of this effect? When Gurudev says people can be affected by this, he is referring to the subtle neuropsychological influence of meditative states. When a person enters deep awareness, the vibrational field around them shifts. Others sitting nearby can feel calmer or agitated depending on their own internal alignment. Meditation is not an isolated internal event, it radiates outward. Neuroscience today proves that the human brain emits measurable electromagnetic fields when someone experiences Jyoti Ananda and the transition from incompleteness to completeness, their brain waves settle into alpha theta coherence. People around them may suddenly experience silence, emotional release, or clarity. Gurudev hints that this is not superstition, it is a real observable phenomenon. That is why in big art of living courses, people say, I don't know why, but I feel peaceful sitting next to this person. In Vedas, this is called the Tejas. When a person's inner light awakens, their aura becomes pronounced. Ancient rishis were described as Prabha Mangala Dharin, bearers of radiance. Gurudev's teaching mirrors this. The activated Jyoti within you influences the subtle bodies of others. This is why satsang is emphasized. One person's inner clarity uplifts the collective atmosphere just as one lit lamp lights many others. Now, Gurudev said that this is part of the brain. Which part is he referring to? Yeah, the Gurudev is pointing toward a limbic system and prefrontal cortex interaction. When the mind quiets down, the amygdala, the responsible for fear and emotional reactivity, becomes less active, while the prefrontal cortex, responsible for higher reasoning and awareness, becomes more integrated. The part of the brain Gurudev refers to is not one anatomical structure, but a functional network of attention, awareness, perception, and emotional processing. Meditation reorganizes this network. This is why he says this is also a part of the brain, meaning many mystical experiences we consider as spiritual have a physical correlates in the brain. But Gurudev emphasizes that even though it appears as a brain phenomenon, it does not originate from the brain. The brain is the instrument through which consciousness expresses. The Vedas describe the three mental layers, the manas, the mind, the buddhi or the intellect, and chitta or the memory. These correspond to different functional regions of the brain. Gurudev's explanation aligns with the Upanishadic understanding. Spiritual experiences are not separate from the body but are reflected through the brain activity. When he says this is a part of the brain, he is grounding spiritual wisdom in physiological reality, bridging ancient knowledge with the modern science, exactly the Vedic approach. Now, what does Gurudev mean when he asks, how does the mind develop? Now, the mind development is not about gaining new information, it is about refinement of perception. Gurudev hints that the mind grows through exposure to sattva, the clarity, sunlight, breath, meditation, and knowledge. When he asks, how does the mind develop? He is pushing us to introspect. The mind develops when it encounters a silence. When the inner jyoti becomes steady, the mind becomes capable of perceiving the subtle levels of reality. Gurudev's message is that the mind does not develop through struggle but through contact with a higher energy. That is why he adds all this is not going to happen in a moment. Growth is gradual. The mind develops through samskaras, the impressions created by knowledge, rituals, meditation, and righteous actions. In Vedic Dharma, the mind evolves through three primary means: the adhyatma, the spiritual practice, the adhyana, the learning, and the sadachara, the righteous conduct. Gurudev's is a day to teaching mirrors this timeless principle. The mind is like clay. Repeated contact with the sun, symbolic of consciousness, hardens and strengthens it. Mind development is nothing but purification leading to expansion. Now, Gurudev says once it comes into contact with the sun, it will be affected. What is this sun? The sun here is symbolic of awareness. When the mind, which is like a soft wax, come in touch with awareness, it transforms. Gurudev uses the sun metaphor to show that transformation doesn't require effort. Just as sunlight naturally softens ice, awareness naturally softens the mental rigidity. The sun can be interpreted as breath, meditation, knowledge, or the presence of a master. When the mind touches this light, it evolves. Gurudev's brilliance lies in using simple metaphors to describe profound inner processes. In Vedas, Surya is not just a celestial body, he is the symbol of pure consciousness. The Surya Narayana scriptures say the sun is the eye of the universe. Contact with the sun represents contact with the truth. Gurudev uses Vedic language in a modern way. When the mind is exposed to sattvic environments like the yagyas, the chanting, and the knowledge sessions, it becomes refined. Just like plants cannot grow without sunlight, the mind cannot grow without a contact with higher consciousness. Now, Gurudev asks, or is it just a dream? Why does he ask this? Gurudev brings this question to highlight the illusory nature of the mind. Many people mistake mental agitation, hallucination, or imagination for a spiritual experience. By asking, is it just a dream? He is encouraging discernment. Meditation reveals the difference between inner reality and mental projection. When you feel the Jyoti or Ananda, the mind may doubt, is this real? This doubt is healthy because it sharpens the awareness. Gurudev uses the question to dissolve blind belief and encourage clarity. In the Mandukya Upanishad, the world is described as Swapnavata, the similar to a dream. Gurudev's question echoes this ancient teaching. Our mental fluctuations are like dreams. When the mind becomes quiet, one sees through thoughts, emotions, and desires are not solid realities. They come and go like dreams. Therefore, Gurudev's question is philosophical. He invites seekers to become witnesses instead of blindly believing every mental image. This aligns with Vedic wisdom. Truth is beyond dream and waking both. Now, Gurudev says again, this is also a part of the brain. What is he emphasizing? Like he emphasizes that spiritual experiences have physical correlates. Many seekers think spirituality is separate from the body or mind, but Gurudev repeatedly brings attention back to the brain because he wants spiritual practices to be understood scientifically. When the brain quiets, the awareness expands. When the brain operates in coherence, the meditation deepens. By saying this is also a part of the brain, he removes the mystical fog around spiritual growth and brings clarity. Awareness influences the brain, and the brain reflects awareness. In the Vedic system, there is no difference between spiritual and physical reality. Everything is interconnected. Gurudev echoes this integrated approach. Even a profound spiritual states produce physiological effects, changes in breath, heart rhythm, and brainwave patterns. By repeating the phrase, he is teaching the modern seeker to balance devotion with understanding. Vedic Dharma celebrates the experiential wisdom, not blind mysticism. Now, Gurudev says this is called the asana. What asana is he referring to? Gurudev is not referring to a physical yoga posture like a Padmasana or a Vajrasana. He is speaking of the inner mental posture when the mind becomes steady and receptive. That is the true asana. Yoga Sutra defines asana as thira sukham, steadiness and comfort. When your inner posture, the attitude, the awareness and breath become stable, the mental asana is complete. Gurudev's explanation shows that asana is not about how flexible your body is, it is about how established your mind is. When the mind leaves this asana, as Gurudev says, suddenly the asana gets affected, meaning inner rest is disturbed. In Vedic tradition, whenever rituals are performed, the priest says, Asanam samarpayami, I offer a seat. This symbolizes giving the mind a steady place to sit. Gurudev uses the same idea inwardly. The true asana is the seat of the mind. When it rests in awareness, when the seat is shaken even slightly, the inner experience collapses. Thus, asana is fundamentally a state of consciousness, not a body position. Now, why does the mind get affected when we leave the asana? Neither because the mind is deeply conditioned. The moment you leave stability, old patterns rush in. Gurudev highlights this to show that the mind is not inherently steady. It needs anchoring. As long as the mind stays in the asana of awareness, it behaves gracefully, but the moment it slips, restlessness returns. This is like training a muscle. If you stop practice, older habits return. Gurudev is making us aware of the delicate nature of mental steadiness. It must be nurtured. Vedas say the mind is like a monkey, restless, jumping, and unpredictable. The asana gives the monkey a branch to hold. When that branch is removed, it becomes agitated. Gurudev's teaching resonates with the Kathopanishadic metaphor of reins and horses. When the mind leaves the seat of awareness, the senses pull it in many directions. Therefore, the mind becomes unstable the moment it leaves the asana. Now, Gurudev repeats, this is called the asana. Why repeat? Jagada, to reinforce the importance, many people think meditation begins after posture is fixed, but Gurudev teaches that posture itself is an inner state. By repeating the line, he derives home the point. Mental stability is the real asana. Without it, even advanced practices collapse. He wants seekers to recognize the subtle transition between awareness and distraction. In Vedic teaching, repetition is used to imprint knowledge. Gurudev follows the ancient method of anuvada or repeating essential truths so they sink in. He ensures seekers don't miss the core teaching. Asana is a consciousness seated in the self. Now, Gurudev asks, do you understand what is the significance of this question? It's a gentle push toward awareness. When Gurudev asks, do you understand? He is not seeking verbal affirmation, he is invoking introspection. He wants you to feel the teaching, not just hear it. This question breaks passive listening and activates the experiential understanding. In the Guru Shishya Parampara, such question awakens the smriti or the inner remembrance. Do you understand means has the wisdom touched your being? It is a call to move from intellectual grasping to experiential knowing. Now Gurudev asks, why did you ask me to do this? What is he pointing to? Neither when Gurudev says, why did you ask me to do this? He is playfully exposing how the mind projects responsibilities outward. Many seekers ask the master to make decisions for them. They want Gurudev to validate their thoughts, actions, or choices. But Gurudev subtly reminds them that much of what they think is instruction from outside is actually their own mind's creation. He highlights this so seekers recognize the self created confusion. He wants them to see that spiritual growth requires owning their decisions, not passing responsibility to the master. His tone is humorous, compassionate, and insightful, pointing out how people often impose their inner noise onto the master's silence. He is teaching freedom. Don't blame the master for your mental stories. Now, in Vedic learning, the guru is the mirror. When Gurudev says, why did you ask me to do this? He is reflecting the disciples' own tendencies. It resembles a Krishna's dialogue in the Gita. Arjuna keeps asking for directives, but Krishna repeatedly draws him back to self awareness. The Guru never imposes, he awakens. Gurudev's question reveals that the seeker must move from dependency to inner clarity. It dismantles the ego subtly without force. Gurudev follows with, which person told you to do this? What is the purpose of this question? This question exposes the mental voices we blindly follow. Gurudev wants us to recognize how much activity in life is guided not by truth but by memory, conditioning, fear, comparison, and imagination. By saying, which person told you to do this? He challenges the seeker to see whether the instruction was genuinely external or just assumed. So, most of our decisions come from internal chatter, not real guidance. Gurudev uses this question to awaken discrimination and responsibility. He removes the tendency to blame others for our confusion. When we realize that the instruction we thought we received was actually our own mind, transformation begins. In Vedic psychology. This is called adhyasa, the superimposition. We project thoughts onto others and believe them to be real. Gurudev's question cuts through the fog. He invites seekers to examine whether they are acting from Shraddha or clarity or samskar or conditioning. The Guru's job is to sharpen the inner discrimination. This question is like the Upanishadic rishis who ask disciples again and again, who told you to do this? Where did this thought arise? It brings the seeker back to the source of thought. The Gurudev says, transform them, transform them. Who is to be transformed? Although the words seem directed toward transform them, Gurudev always means inner transformation first. The them refers to thoughts, emotions, doubts, and mental impressions that disturb clarity. He is urging seekers to transform negativity into awareness, restlessness into stillness, and incompleteness into completeness. Gurudev often emphasizes that true transformation begins with oneself. You cannot change people outside unless your inner atmosphere is transformed. By repeating transform them, he highlights the urgency and possibility of inner alchemy. Transformation is not a future event, it begins in the present moment through awareness. In the Vedic tradition, transformation or the parivartan happens on three levels: the thought, the speech, and the action. Gurudev's instruction mirrors this. The them refers to impurities of mala or impurities of vikshepa or distraction and avarana or ignorance. These must be transformed through knowledge, ritual purity, meditation, and devotion. Even external rituals aim at inner refinement. So Gurudev's call to transform them is a call to refine the three gunas within us. Now, Gurudev repeats the phrase multiple times. What is the deeper significance of this repetition? The Gurudev uses repetition not for emphasis alone but to create an energetic impact. Repetition breaks the linear thinking pattern and enters the subconscious. Just as a mantra becomes powerful through repetition, instruction becomes transformative when repeated in the master's presence. By saying transform them, he entrains the listener's mind into action. Repetition dissolves resistance and opens the heart. When the mind hears the same phrase again and again, its defensive layers weaken, allowing the deeper message to sink in. In Vedic chanting, repetition is central. A mantra repeated once has one effect, repeated thrice. It purifies the layers of existence, the physical, the subtle, the causal. Gurudev's repetition follows this Vedic style. He is not merely instructing, he is invoking transformation. Just as priests repeat the swaha or idam namama Many times, Gurudev repeats to sanctify the seeker's inner space. Repetition turns instruction into initiation. The seeker says, I don't know how to do this. Why does Gurudev highlight this? Now, the Gurudev highlights this statement to reveal the innocence and vulnerability of the seeker. I don't know how to do this is a powerful beginning in spirituality. Not knowing opens the door to learning. Many come with the preconceived notions, but only those who admit I don't know can receive the teaching fully. Gurudev uses this moment to show that surrender is not weakness, it's the foundation of growth. He also wants the seeker to see that the instruction is not complicated, one only needs awareness, not technique. The transformation he refers to is a natural, not effort based. The seeker's honesty becomes the catalyst. In Vedic learning, the student approaches the guru with humility. The Vidyanarthi Bhavati, one who wishes to learn, becomes a childlike. The phrase I don't know is highly auspicious because knowledge can enter an empty vessel, not a full one. Gurudev acknowledges the statement to prepare the seeker for deeper teaching. It mirrors the Upanishadic prayer, teach me for I know nothing. This surrender attracts grace. Now Gurudev says, I had to say a few more things. What is he implying? Jagadish Gurudev implies that the teaching is layered and ongoing. He often introduces a concept subtly and expands it later depending on the openness of the group. By saying, I had to say a few more things, he prepares the seekers for deeper instructions that were yet to come. It also shows that the Master's teaching is not random. It follows an inner sequence. He reveals wisdom gradually, giving exactly what the mind can absorb at that moment. He signals that there is more refinement, more insight, and more depth awaiting the seeker as they stabilize in the earlier instructions. In the Guru Shishya tradition, teaching is never delivered in one stroke. Knowledge unfolds like petals. Gurudev's statement reflects the structuring of Vedic discourses, first the introduction, then the elaboration, then the deeper revelation. I had to say a few more things implies that the seeker must remain attentive. The Upadesha is not complete. This inspires the Shraddha and anticipation. Now Gurudev says, look, you said this, I did that. What is he illustrating? He is demonstrating the dynamics of projection and expectation. The seeker said something, but Gurudev's response was different from what the seeker expected. This highlights how people often expect the master to respond in predictable ways. Gurudev brings attention to the gap between expectation and reality. Through this narrative, he teaches that spiritual evolution requires letting go of personal interpretations and simply observing what is. He shows that the mind imposes meaning where none exists. This exchange reflects the Upanishadic method called the Virodha Bhaga Bhanga, breaking contradictions. The Guru demonstrates that disciples' interpretation and the Guru intention can differ. Recognizing this difference is essential for real learning. Gurudev's explanation reveals a subtle distance between the seeker's assumptions and the Guru's clarity. Now, the Gurudev points out all this is because you are sitting in your own world. Why is this own world? Yeah, the own world refers to the bubble of thoughts, emotions, fears, and judgments that people carry. Most individuals do not respond to reality, they respond to their internal world. Gurudev is highlighting how the seeker remains trapped in personal conditioning instead of being present. This world is created by memory and imagination, not truth. Gurudev gently exposes how this inner world distorts perception. This aligns with the Vedic concept of avastatraya, the waking, dreaming, and deep sleep. Gurudev is pointing to the fact that most people operate in a dreamlike state even while awake. Their own world is a projection of samskaras. True vision comes when one steps out of this world into the world of pure awareness. Now, Gurudev adds, and this world is not yours. What does this mean? Gurudev means that the personal world we cling to is not our true self. It is borrowed from society, upbringing, trauma, attachments, and desires. It's a constructed identity, not the essence. When he says, this world is not yours, he liberates the seeker from identification with the mental baggage. He invites the seeker to recognize that the real self is beyond this fabricated world. Vedas say the world perceived through the mind is Maya, not false, but ultimately real. Gurudev's statement echoes this wisdom. The world created by ego is not one's true dharma. The seeker must rise to the cosmic world of truth. Now, Gurudev says you can go anywhere, just sit in your own world. What is he teaching here? Gurudev reveals that the mind can travel anywhere but remains trapped if inner patterns don't change. People travel to temples, ashrams, retreats, yet remain stuck in old thoughts. The real spiritual journey is internal. Sit in your own world means observe your mind without escaping. Transformation happens through awareness, not geographical movement. In Vedic wisdom, the pilgrimage of the Tirth Yatra is meaningful only when the inner purification accompanies the outer travel. Gurudev is teaching the same. Unless you transcend your inner world, no outward movement brings celebration. Now, how does Gurudev describe the subtle shift when the mind feels incomplete and then experiences completeness? Now, the Gurudev often says the sensation of something is missing is the mind's oldest habit. The mind constantly compares, evaluates, and imagines alternatives. In day two, when he humorously said, "Didn't you feel today that something is lacking in him? That there is not a completeness?" He was pointing to this very moment. The mind constructs a story that something should be different, and from that emerges a feeling of incompleteness. But when the prana settles, when the breath synchronizes, and when awareness expands, the mind suddenly experiences fullness. Nothing outside changes, only the inner noise subsides. That completeness shines by itself. He often compares this to clouds covering the sun. When the clouds clear, we realize the sun was always shining. So, too, completeness is not an achievement, it is a recognition. And meditation makes this recognition effortless. In the Vedic worldview, this transition is called the Purnatva Bodha, the awakening of fullness. Shastras say the mind's sense of incompleteness is avidya, and the instant one touches the inner silence, the Purnamidam becomes an experience, not a mantra. Gurudev brings this alive very simply. Now, what does Gurudev mean when he says the action becomes the mental and then becomes excellent? The Gurudev was referring to the shift from external effort to internal alignment. When he says the action becomes mental, he does not mean imaginary. He means it becomes effortless. Initially, every practice feels physical. The movement of hands in Jyoti meditation, the postures in asanas, the act of chanting. Slowly, the same action gets rooted in awareness rather than muscles. At this point, the mind is fully participating, not as stress but as presence. This makes the action excellent. Excellence in the spiritual sense is not about outer perfection but inner synchronization. For example, even a simple gesture like lighting a lamp becomes a sacred when the mind is quiet. In Vedic ritual science, this is exactly how a kriya evolves into a yajna. External actions are only preliminary. The real offering happens in the mind. In fact, the manas puja, the mental worship, is considered superior because it is free from distraction and mechanical repetition. Gurudev's statement echoes scriptures that say when the mind unites with the act becomes divine. Now, how can people be affected by subtle practices like Jyoti meditation? Now, the Jyoti meditation works directly with attention and the light symbol within. When Gurudev says that people can be affected by this, he means the nervous system responds immediately to symbolic light. Neuroscience today shows that even imagined light activates the brain's pineal and prefrontal areas. The mind associates light with safety, clarity, and expansion. Hence, the practice dissolves anxiety. Many participants feel tears, laughter, or deep silence. These responses are not emotional instability, they are purification. The Vedas say, Jyotisam Jyoti, light is the light behind all light. Meditating on light is one of the most ancient practices. Even in the Sandhya Vandanam, that meditator visualizes the solar brilliance internally. Gurudev revives this in a modern scientific way. People are affected because they reconnect with the archetype of light that is embedded in the collective psyche. Now, Gurudev mentioned this is a part of the brain. What is he referring to? And he points toward a neurological basis of spiritual experience. Many people think meditation is a psychological, but Gurudev often explains that every emotion, every impression of the samskara, and every spiritual sensation correlates to a part of the brain. When he says this is also a part of the brain, he is demystifying the process. Your feeling of expansion, your senses of subtleness, during Jyoti, your perception of incompleteness or completeness, these are all neural. When prana moves, the brain lights up differently. Specific regions like the limbic system, insula, and anterior cingulate get activated. Gurudev brings spirituality into the language of modern science so people relate easily. In Vedanta, the brain is not the origin of consciousness, but the instrument through which the consciousness expresses. Scriptures call it the Chitta Bhumi, the field where the impressions operate, saying it is part of the brain, bridges the ancient wisdom and modern understanding. It makes the spiritual science accessible. Now, Gurudev says the mind development doesn't happen in a moment. What does this mean? Then the mind development is gradual. Gurudev emphasizes that spiritual maturity is not instant. One meditation can give peace, but transmission requires rhythm. The mind is used to reacting, judging, complaining, resisting. These habits are deep. Slowly, with each kriya and meditation, layers peel away. He compares this to polishing a diamond. Every session refines clarity. Mind development means becoming stable, joyful, and non reactive. It is the unfolding of intelligence, not the accumulation of information. Now, the Yoga Shastras call this the Chitta Prasadana, the purification of the mind. Patanjali says Abhyasa, or the practice over a long time, is essential. Gurudev's teachings perfectly align with this. Even great sages practice daily discipline, and as Gurudev says, don't demand instant enlightenment, let the mind blossom naturally. Now, what does Gurudev mean by the mind getting affected when it comes in contact with the sun? Jagadev's sun refers both to the literal sun and to the inner symbol of brilliance and the intellect. Scientifically, sunlight affects circadian rhythms, serotonin levels, and cognitive clarity. Spiritually, sunlight is a metaphor for energy, awareness, and truth. Gurudev blends both. When the mind comes in contact with sun, the inner or outer it gets illuminated, confusion melts, sadness lifts. Even during the Jyoti meditation, when visualizing light, the mind undergoes similar shifts. The sun's energy reorganizes prana. In Vedic cosmology, Surya is the remover of inner darkness. Even Gayatri Mantra invokes the solar brilliance to illuminate the intellect. Sun here means the supreme consciousness. When mind touches that brilliance, its impurities burn away. Now, Gurudev asks, or is it just a dream? What is the significance? Either he was pointing to the illusion like nature of mental patterns. The mind creates stories, fears, memories, doubts, then believes them as truth. The Gurudev asks, or is it just a dream? To shake our identification, most suffering is imagined. When you wake up from a dream, the problems dissolves. Similarly, the awareness mental suffering dissolves. Gurudev uses humor to make people realize the illusory drama the mind creates. Vedanta calls this the Swapna Tulya Jagata. The world is dreamlike, not unreal, but transient. Recognizing this reduces attachment and emotional heaviness. Gurudev's question is a modern way to introduce non dual wisdom. Now, what is the asana according to Gurudev's day to explanation? Asana is the seat of the body and the seat of the mind. Gurudev explains that the mind gets influenced by the posture. When posture changes, the prana changes and mind changes. This asana is not stretching, it is stability. The moment you leave the posture, mind shifts. This shows the deep link between body and consciousness. Patanjali says, Sthira Sukham Asanam. Gurudev brings this to life. Stability and comfort bring mental stillness. Asana becomes a meditation. Now, why does the mind suddenly get affected when we leave an asana? And when prana reorganizes instantly, every posture channels the energy differently. Leaving an asana disrupts that flow briefly. This is why Gurudev emphasizes awareness during transitions. The mind follows the prana. Scriptures say asanas awaken the specific energy channels of the nadis. Leaving an asana shifts the nadi activity. Hence, the mind reacts. Gurudev simplifies this ancient truth beautifully. Now, Gurudev asked, Do you understand why does he repeat it? Gurudev repeats when he wants the listener to catch the subtlety behind the word. Spiritual knowledge is caught, not just heard. His repetition pulls the mind inward. The Guru Vakya becomes the mantra when heard with attention. Repetition ensures it enters the heart, not just the intellect. Now, Gurudev asks, Why did you ask me to do this? What is the deeper meaning? On day two, Gurudev uses the humorous question to reveal a profound truth. Most of our actions, expectations, and emotional reactions are projections of our own mind. We often believe someone else is making us do something, feel something, or behave a certain way. But Gurudev points out that the real instigator is our own internal dialogue. By asking, Why did you ask me to do this? He challenges the mind's tendency to externalize responsibility. He gently exposes how we create invisible scripts about what others expect. This question is not literal, it is a mirror. It makes us realize that much of our suffering comes from imagined conversations and internal pressures rather than real demands. When this insight dawns, a burden lifts. We stop blaming others for our own mental noise. In Vedanta, this is called adhyoropa, so superimposition. We superimpose our ideas onto people and then respond as if they truly said those things. Gurudev's question helps break this patterns. The moment we see that the mind is projecting, detaching arises. This is why the Guru uses playful questions to shatter illusion with grace. Now, Gurudev then asks, Which person told you to do this? What does this signify spiritually? Gurudev's question aims to make us pause when we act out of compulsion, guilt, fear, or people pleasing. We rarely notice that no external authority is actually pushing us. Our mind assumes voice, the parents, the colleagues, the society, and operates out of imagined expectations. Gurudev's question is a surgical strike on this unconscious conditioning. It wakes us up to the fact that inner freedom is available the moment we stop giving power to imaginary dictators. The question dismantles psychological slavery. It makes us recognize that we are free beings operating from awareness, not from internalized voices. In Dharma Shastras, this is beautifully explained in Swatantra Buddhi. The intellect rests in inner freedom. Many karmas become binding because we wrongly believe someone else is making us act. Gurudev's inquiry pushes the seeker into Viveka discernment. Who told you? Nobody. The mind made it up. Realizing this dissolves karma's psychological burden. Now, how does Gurudev's instruction transform them relate to spiritual growth? This instruction is not about changing other people. Gurudev is telling us to transform the impressions within us. When he repeats transform them, he is referring to the thoughts, reactions, tendencies, and emotions that arise during meditation or in life situations. Instead of resisting them or feeling guilty, he asks us to transform them into awareness. In meditation, when thoughts appear, we offer them to the light of consciousness. They transform. This is alchemy, pain into wisdom, anger into clarity, restlessness into silence. In the Vedic worldview, this is called the Samskara Shuddhi. Every ritual from Homa to Japa exists to purify impressions. Gurudev brings the same principle into daily practice. Transform the means convert your inner heaviness into lightness through awareness. It aligns perfectly with Yoga Vasistha, where Rama is told to transform his mental formation rather than run away from them. Now, Gurudev mentions people say, I don't know how to do this. Why is this feeling so common? Yeah, the people often feel this because spiritual practices work on certain levels. The mind wants clear instructions, but the experience requires surrender. When Gurudev says many people feel I don't know how to do this, he is normalizing confusion. The seeker expects perfection, but spiritual growth is organic. This phrase emerges when the intellect tries to control something that belongs to the heart. Gurudev reassures that technique is secondary, presence is primary. When you relax, the practice starts doing you. Now, in the scriptures, this is called Agyana Vibrama, the trembling of the mind when entering subtle realms. Even Arjuna asked Krishna, how do I meditate? I don't know. Gurudev echoes the same compassion. Not knowing is part of the journey. Grace completes the rest. Now, Gurudev says, people say, look, you said this, I did this. What pattern is he exposing? Neither he is pointed to the drama of justification. Humans constantly narrates their actions. I did this because you said that. This mental storytelling fuels ego and conflict. Gurudev exposes this to help us to see how the mind creates unnecessary complexity. When we justify, we are defending an identity. The more the identity, the more the suffering. Gurudev encourages dropping the whole dialogue. Just be no need to justify or blame. Justification is a symptom of ahankara, the egoic doership. The Shastras say that the wise one acts without justification like a lotus leaf untouched by water. Gurudev's teaching mirrors this state. Now, Gurudev says all this is because you are sitting in your own world. What does this mean? Neither he means that the most thoughts are self created simulations we interpret, imagine, assume, and then react to our own fabrications. Your own world means psychological isolation. When we live in imagination, we lose the vibrancy of the present moment. Gurudev's statement is a powerful wake up call to return to reality. In Vedanta, this is the world of Manomaya Kosha. It's not a real world but a projection. Freedom begins when we see the difference between reality and mental construction. Now, Gurudev adds, and this world is not yours. What is the implication? Jagadath, this means we don't own the narrative the mind creates. The world inside our head is not the truth. Recognizing this breaks identification with mental chatter. Spiritual progress accelerates when the seeker realizes that they are not a thinker, they are awareness. The Upanishads say you are not the mind. Gurudev conveys the same non dual wisdom in simple terms. The world of thoughts is not your real home. Now, Gurudev says you can go anywhere, just sit in your own world. What is the paradox? Jagadish, the paradox is that physical movement does not free us from mental patterns. You can travel across the world but still remain trapped in inner dialogue. Gurudev reveals that freedom is an inward journey, not a change of scenery. Unless awareness awakens, the traveling simply becomes escaping. Scriptures say, Mano hi samsaram. Mind is the world. Unless the mind changes, nothing changes. Gurudev expresses this truth beautifully. Now, Gurudev says, what you did was wrong, but it is not a big deal. What a wisdom he is giving. Jayadavi is giving teaching emotional maturity. People commit mistakes, then drown in guilt. Gurudev says mistakes happen, but they should not become a burden. Recognize, correct, grow, and move on. His compassion transforms guilt into learning. He removes heaviness with the humor and lightness. In Dharma text, this is a prayashchita. Acknowledge the mistake, resolve not to repeat, and continue with purity. Gurudev brings this spirit into everyday life. Now he says, I will not repeat it. Why is this so powerful? Because intention shapes destiny. When a seeker sincerely says, I will not repeat it, the samskara breaks. Gurudev encourages responsibility without guilt. The statement becomes a reset for consciousness. Shastra says, Sankalpa Shakti. The power of intention purifies this. Gurudev aligns us with this ancient practice. Now, why does Gurudev emphasize that even a small issue should not be made into a big deal? Jagannatha Gurudev frequently highlights that the human mind magnifies minor issues into major emotional burdens. In day two, when he says it can be a small issue, it is not a big deal. He's training us to develop the proportion in thinking. Most stress arises not from the event but from the mental amplification around it. The mind creates stories, interpretations, and imagined consequences, turning a small situation into a crisis. Gurudev wants seekers to gain mastery over this tendency. When we don't exaggerate situations, clarity returns and responses become intelligent rather than emotional. He teaches that life becomes lighter when we stop dramatizing. Spiritual maturity is learning to handle small issues with calmness so they don't occupy unnecessary mental space. This frees energy for creativity, service, and joy. In scriptures, this is called the matra sparsha. Every experience has a proportionate intensity. Wise people maintain balance. Bhagavad Gita says disturbance come from over identification with small fluctuations. Gurudev's advice stabilizes the seeker in samatva or equanimity. It prevents the mind from becoming a battlefield of exaggerated emotions. Now, how does Gurudev convert guilt into learning during his teachings? Gurudev has a unique way of dissolving guilt without dismissing responsibility. When someone admits a mistake, he does not scold or shame them. Instead, he normalizes the human imperfection. He gently acknowledges the error, then instantly shifts the focus to growth, not regret. His message is learn and move on. This prevents the stagnation that guilt creates. Guilt paralyzes action, learning energizes. Gurudev uses humor, lightness, and compassion to help seekers drop the heavy emotional residue. He often says, don't sit and chew your past, it is gone. By doing so, he transforms guilt into wisdom and innocence. This approach creates an environment where seekers are honest with themselves without fear of judgment. This reflects a Vedic concept of Rashama or forgiveness and Utsaha or renewed enthusiasm. Scriptures prescribe Prayaschitta not to punish but to purify, and Amparagurudev embodies this instead of guilt leading to self blame. It becomes self transformation. This is why his presence uplifts even those who feel broken. Now, Gurudev says the mind is sitting in its own world. How can the seekers break out of this inner world? Again, the own world refers to the repetitive patterns of thoughts, emotional loops, and assumptions. Breaking out requires awareness. Gurudev teaches that meditation is the doorway out of this inner prison. When we meditate, the mind's script loosens, the inner noise reduces. We begin to see thoughts as passing clouds instead of reality. Another tool Gurudev gives is active engagement of seva, chanting, kriya. Each pulls the mind out of its self created cocoon. Listening to knowledge also disrupts the repetitive thinking. The real breakthrough happens when we observe our thoughts without believing them. This witnessing breaks the spell of the inner world. Now, in Vedanta, this is liberation from Manomaya Kosha. Scripture says the mind traps itself through past impressions. The solution is the Sakshi Bhava, the witness consciousness. Gurudev's teachings reawaken this ancient method in a modern, simple way, empowering ordinary people to step out of the mental bondage. Now, what spiritual lesson is hidden in Gurudev saying this world is not yours? He means that the mind's world is borrowed from conditioning, the past experiences, the fears and memories. None of it is truly you. When we detach from the inner narrative, we discover freedom. Gurudev's statement helps us seekers stop clinging to their identity stories. The world inside the head, the hurt, people, dreams, and imagination is not the real world. Realizing this creates the spaciousness and peace. In the Upanishads, this is the essence of Neti Neti, not this, not this. You are not the mind, not the story, not the projections. Gurudev's guidance mirrors this timeless wisdom, but with simplicity and humor, making profound Vedanta accessible to everyone. Now, why does Gurudev insist that physical movement cannot free you from inner agitation? Gurudev explains that the mind carries its turbulence wherever the body goes. Changing location doesn't dissolve mental patterns. People travel, relocate, or escape from situations hoping for relief, yet the same patterns return. Freedom comes only through inner work, the breath, the meditation, the observation, and surrender. Gurudev says, just sit in your own world, highlighting that one must confront and release internal turbulence rather than run from it. When inner stillness develops, even chaotic environments feel peaceful. The Shastras say, Manohi Samsara, the mind itself is a world. Without transforming the mind, external change is superficial. Gurudev brings seekers to this foundational truth that liberation is inward. Now, Gurudev states that what someone did was wrong, but still not a big deal. How does this balance compassion with clarity? Jagadev Gurudev's approach prevents to extremes carelessness and guilt. By acknowledging it was wrong, he maintains clarity and moral grounding. But by adding not a big deal, he prevents the mind from spiraling into a shame. This balanced approach is essential for true growth. He teaches seekers to be accountable without being self-punishing. This lets learning happen in a healthy emotional space. His tone conveys that mistakes are stepping stones, not stumbling blocks. This balance keeps the seeker humble yet confident. Now, this mirrors Krishna's teaching in the Gita: recognize the mistake, rise again, and continue with the purity. Gurudev's method is classical dharma expressed in contemporary language. Now, why does Gurudev discourage the dwelling on past mistakes? Because dwelling reinforces the memory and deepens the emotional impression. Gurudev teaches that the past is dead, only the lesson must remain. When a person mentally repeats a mistake, the mind becomes heavy, the heart becomes closed, and enthusiasm drains. Instead, he invites seekers to stay fresh. The moment we drop the burden, the nervous system relaxes and intelligence returns. Dwelling on mistakes blocks intuition, joy, and creativity. Gurudev wants seekers to live with lightness. Vedic text says Smrita dosha, distorted memory, creates suffering. Freedom is in the Kshetra Shuddhi, the cleansing of inner fields. Gurudev's wisdom aligns perfectly with these ancient principles. Now, how does Gurudev cultivate the inner responsibility without inducing fear? He creates a safe, non judgmental space. Responsibility normally triggers fear because people associate it with punishment. Gurudev redefines responsibility as awareness, not burden. When he gently corrects someone, it feels like compassion, not condemnation. This motivates seekers to take responsibility willingly. He guides them to recognize their patterns and make conscious changes. Because his tone is loving, responsibility becomes empowering. In a Dharma Shastra, the highest responsibility is the Atma Vichara or self reflection. Gurudev embodies this, his presence makes responsibility a joyous process, not a fearful one. Now, why does Gurudev often use humor while addressing deep inner issues? Jagadev, humor disarms the ego, it relaxes the listener. Deep truths penetrate more easily when the mind is not defensive. Gurudev uses humor to lighten the heavy emotions and make the intellect flexible. Humor also reveals the absurdity of our mental patterns. Through laughter, we drop resistance and receive the wisdom effortlessly. It's a therapeutic tool, a spiritual technique, and an expression of compassion. In many ancient traditions, the sages use the hasya rasa to transmit knowledge. Humor breaks the mental rigidity. Gurudev continues this lineage with the mastery. Now, why does Gurudev emphasize that awareness, not technique, is the heart of transformation? Technique prepares the ground, but awareness creates the shift. Gurudev teaches that meditation, the kriya, the chanting, all are tools. The real transformation happens when awareness awakens. Awareness dissolves conditioning, quiets the mind, and aligns the actions with clarity. With awareness, even simple practices become powerful. With awareness, without awareness, even advanced techniques remain mechanical. Gurudev's teaching brings seekers from technique dependency to awareness and to living. In the Upanishads, Bodha, the inner knowing is the real purifier. Techniques are supports. Gurudev's guidance reflects this internal truth. Now, how does Gurudev explain the nature of emotional turbulence and how can we handle it? Jagadev, Gurudev beautifully explains that emotional turbulence is not a flaw in us. It is simply the mind's weather. Just as the sky is never affected by clouds, the self is not affected by moods. The problem is not the emotion itself, anger, fear, sadness, but our identification with it. On day two, Gurudev said that the emotions become heavy not when we start saying this is happening to me. When we delink the emotion from our identity, it dissolves much faster. Through Sudarshan Kriya, the breath rhythm systematically releases the emotional toxins stored in the nervous system. That is why after Kriya, people often say, I feel light, but nothing externally changed. Awareness plus breath is the mastery over emotions. Now, in the Vedic tradition, emotions are considered the vrittis, the movements of the mind. The scriptures say, Mana eva manushyanam karanam bandha mokshyo. Mind alone binds and mind alone liberates. During day two of wisdom talk, Gurudev quote this ancient principle. Rituals like the Rudrahoma, the Chandihoma, and the Parayana, such as the Sundarkana, are designed to purify emotional disturbances through sound vibrations. Fire dispels heaviness, mantra stabilizes the mind, and devotion melts the rigid emotions. Handling emotions becomes effortless when we reconnect with the depth of our being through sadhana, seva, and satsang. Now, what did Gurudev say about dealing with difficult people and relationships? Neither Gurudev's insight is simple yet transformative. Do not expect people to behave according to your idea of them. He explained that stress comes when our mental projection of a person clashes with the natural behavior. On day two, he said that the relations become lighter When we give people the space to be imperfect, he emphasized the three skills: the patience, the non reactivity, and humor. Patience stops you from escalating the situation. Non-reactivity breaks the cycle of hurt. Humor dissolves tension instantly. Gurudev also said that when we meditate regularly, our aura becomes so calm that we stop absorbing negativity from others. Instead, we influence the environment silently. The breath is again the master key. When you are angry, you can't breathe deeply. When you breathe deeply, you cannot stay angry. In the Vedic perspective, relationships are karmic classrooms. Those who irritate us often carry karmic contracts with us meant for inner cleansing. Day 2 wisdom session aligns with the Bhagavad Gita words Samadukha Sukha, one who sees joy and sorrow with balance is wise. Traditional practices like the Lagu Rudra, the Mahamrityunjaya Japa, and family Graha Shanti rituals are meant to restore harmony in relational fields. In many families, when regular Humas begins, the conflict spontaneously reduce. Mantras purify collective consciousness. Gurudev's teaching integrates this beautifully. Meditation resolves 180% of the conflicts before they arise. Now, how does Gurudev explain the connection between death and breath and karma? Jagdev Gurudev often says breath is the thread that links body, mind, and karma. On day 2, he explained that karma is not some mystical external force, it is simply the impressions accumulated in our nervous system. Every strong experience leaves a mark, and those marks create tendencies. These tendencies drive our behavior. The breath is the most direct tool to erase these impressions. When a person experiences a trauma or intense emotion, the breath becomes irregular. When someone is joyful, the breath becomes light. Thus, breath is both an indicator and a remover of karmic impressions. Through Sudarshan Kriya, rhythmic breathing changes the vibration patterns of the prana, loosening and dissolving the karma. Gurudev said that when the pranic energy becomes harmonious, our negative tendencies fall away naturally without struggle. Life becomes lighter, choices become wiser, and destiny becomes brighter. Now, in Vedic philosophy, karma resides in the pranic sheath. The prana carries the subtle memory of actions. This is why the pranayama is not merely a wellness practice, it's a karmic purifier. Ancient texts like the Yoga Yajnavalkya highlight how breath can burn samskaras the way fire burns cotton. Rituals like the Rudra Homa and the Chandi Parayana use mantra, fire, and breath in unison to cleanse the karmic list. Gurudev's day to teaching perfectly mirrors this tradition. When prana becomes smooth, the karmic knots of the granthis begin to open. This is why sincere sadhana, seva, and satsang accelerate the karmic release more than any other effort. Now, what guidance did Gurudev give about nature of suffering? Gurudev explained that suffering is not in the situation but in the resistance to the situation. He said, pain is inevitable but suffering is optional. On day 2, he elaborated that suffering arises whenever we say, this should not be happening. The mind pulls the past into the present and creates psychological pain. Gurudev teaches a simple formula: accept plus act plus let go. First, accept what is, then act where the action is possible. Finally, let go of what you cannot control. He emphasized that meditation shifts our inner posture from resistance to acceptance, dissolving suffering. When the mind is steady, the clarity emerges. Problems appear smaller and solutions arise naturally. The shift is internal first. In the Vedic viewpoint, suffering arises from misalignment with dharma. The scriptures describe the tapa, the inner heat caused by ignorance, desire, and attachment. Gurudev's explanation reflects the Upanishadic statement, Dukkham janati anjanam ajnanam. Suffering comes not from seeing reality as it is. Rituals such as the Navagraha Homa, the Rudrabhishekam, and the Shanti Part are meant to harmonize planetary forces and mental patterns. When inner harmony is restored through mantra, fire, and devotion, suffering dissolves. Gurudev essentially brings the same truth in contemporary language. When the mind expands, the suffering shrinks. Now, how does Gurudev describe the subtle shift from effort to effortlessness in spiritual practice? Now, the Gurudev beautifully explained on day 2 that true spiritual practice begins with effort but matures into effortlessness. In the beginning, the mind needs discipline, sit at a fixed place, close the eyes, bring attention back, practice breath techniques, and follow the instructions. But as the inner prana becomes refined, meditation happens to you rather than by you. Gurudev calls this the transition from doing to happening. It's like the child learning to ride a bicycle. Initially, there is wobbling, correcting, and fear, but once balance is found, the cycle moves effortlessly. In sadhana, once the mind begins to taste the sweetness of stillness, it naturally gravitates towards silence. Gurudev said effort is needed only to show up. After that, the experience pulls you inward. He emphasized that the greatest sign of maturity is what meditation feels like coming home, not like a task. This shift is described in the Vedas as a movement from abhyasa or practice to Vairagya or freedom. In the Patanjali Yoga Sutra, sustained practice removes impurities, making the mind fit for absorption. Once purity is achieved, the divine flow, the anugraha, takes over. In rituals, the same pattern occurs. First, the mantras must be pronounced consciously. Eventually, the chanter becomes a hollow instrument through which the mantra chants itself. During homas and the pujas, experienced priests feel the fire drawing them into a trance-like state. Gurudev's explanation mirrors this ancient truth. Effort prepares a vessel, grace fills it. Now, what did Gurudev say about the impact of subtle impressions on mental clarity? Gurudev explained the mind is not a fixed entity, it's a field constantly shaped by impressions or samskaras. Every sound, sight, emotion, and memory leaves a subtle trace. Over time, these impressions accumulate like dust on a mirror, making reflection unclear. This is why people feel confused, lost, or heavy without knowing the reason. According to Gurudev, practices like Sudarshan Kriya work at the vibration level to shake off old impressions, just as deep cleaning removes the layers of dirt. When these impressions dissolve, clarity emerges naturally. The mind becomes sharp, intuitive, and creative. Gurudev said that a calm, clean mind sees possibilities, while a cluttered mind sees only problems. He emphasized that this clarity is not intellectual but experiential. It comes from inner stillness, not from external analysis. Now, the Vedic texts describe the impressions as the vasanas, which bind the soul to repeated patterns. The Chandogya Upanishad states, as is one's thought, so one becomes. Rituals such as the Chandi Path, Vishnu Sahasranama, and the recitation of the Upanishads purify the subtle body. Sacred fire has the ability to burn residual impressions, and specific mantras are designed to cleanse the mental distortions. In temple traditions, darshan itself is a cleansing because the deity's vibrations resets the devotee's mind. Gurudev's teachings perfectly align with this. He presents the ancient purification methods in a form accessible to modern seekers through breath awareness and deep meditation.